Now you can fight Vox Machina, but you'll want to make sure to almost bleed to death beforehand to ensure your victory. We'll tell you why. This book is Tal'Dorei Campaign Setting Reborn. It is a about like pound and a half, 2 pounds of Critical Role campaign setting guide. It is chock full of information about the world of Exandria and specifically the continent of Tal'Dorei. And I figure that's when you can like do a cool Ken Burns over the map. You'll find a guide to pretty much every region on the continent. You'll get points of interest. You'll get a ton of stuff, a ton of details, adventure hooks, notable NPCs. You'll also find, if you're a player, a bunch of new player options, including new subclasses, new feats, new magic items. And if you're a GM, you'll find new rules to use, new monsters, and a whole lot more. There are 9 subclasses in this book, 5 of which have never appeared before in Tal'Dorei. There's the Barbarian Path of the Juggernaut, the Bard College of Tragedy, the Cleric Moon Domain, the Cleric Blood Domain. There's the Druid Circle of the Blighted, the Monk Way of the Cobalt Soul, the Paladin Oath of the Open Sea, the Rune Child Sorcerer, and the Blood Magic Wizard. As you might imagine, the Barbarian Path of the Juggernaut is all about smashing through things, Kool-Aid manning your way into things, and in general being the Juggernaut, bitch! You can knock foes back, you break objects, it's great, it's a ton of fun, you're unstoppable. The Bard College of Tragedy is all about being emo on the surface, but it's actually one of the most effective support classes I've seen. If you take this, your party is leveling up. Seriously. The Blood Domain Cleric is all about using the power of blood to either creepily see through someone's eyes or creepily take control of them. The Moon Domain Cleric is all about using the magic of the moons, because Critical Role, of course, has 2 moons in their world. The Druid Circle of the Blighted is like, what if an eco-villain was also a druid? The Monk Way of the Cobalt Soul, as seen in Campaign 2, is all about what if you were a monk who every time you punched someone, you got to know them just a little bit better. Kind of like that one clip from The Matrix 2. Paladin, Oath of the Open Sea, is, as seen in Campaign 2, all about paladins who decide a pirate's life is for them. You get to take to the open sea, you're all about freedom and doing cool stuff in the name of the ocean. Rune Child Sorcerers are a very complex and interesting concept that I can't figure out if it's busted or not, but you can charge up runes on your body with magic that you can then use later. That's it in a nutshell, but there's so much crunch to it. And then there's Blood Magic Wizards, who are all about using their blood to fuel their magic. As you might expect, this is another one of Matt Mercer's Get Your Character Killed specials, but it looks like a lot of fun to play. You can do more damage, or you can kind of replace the costly components of material spells, all just for the small price of your blood. And that's all of the subclasses. I think they're a lot of fun. There's a lot of cool stuff to dig into. I think depending on what your playstyle is, there's something for everyone. Some of them do feel a little bit more like mechanically older, which is a weird thing to say about 5th edition, but that just, it's been around for almost 10 years, so like that's how it is. But they all have something interesting at the table, which is, I think, very, very unique for a list of new subclasses. Hey, do you like magic items? Well, so does Matt Mercer, James Hake, and Hannah Rose, the authors of this book. And you can tell that because it is packed with magic items that feel incredibly unique, that have abilities that feel like you'd actually want to play with them at the table, that feel like they're exciting, that they have a story to them besides just doing an extra +1 to attacks and damage. We've talked about that on this channel before, and that principle is present in these things. You can play with items like the Dagger of Denial, which is a +2 magic dagger that you can stab into a keyhole and use to seal it shut. Or you could use a more unique weapon like Krazchar, the Decadent End, a magic greatsword that looks cool but is actually rusted and dripping with acid. but it's pretending to be a holy avenger. But there's a ton of like common magic items as well. In fact, under a section called Tools of the Ashari, we get perhaps my favorite stuff that I've ever seen in a D&D book. The Earth Board, which is basically a surfboard, but for surfing on land. So I guess you could call it a skateboard because that's how skateboards got invented. This thing lets you glide across solid ground as though it were the liquid ocean. You get to move faster, you get to do cool stuff, and there's even rules for hitting a sick ramp. How about a sky sail? That's right, there's two of my favorite things in this book. The sky sail is a pair of magical wings that let you surf in the sky. But the biggest draw is the Vestiges of Divergence. That is a hard thing to say, but these are weapons that, as we mentioned before, have like the power of the gods in them, and they're leftover artifacts from the time when the gods warred with each other. They're powerful weapons that you can kind of empower as you go. So you could have one early on and it's not that busted, and then as you grow in power, so does it. I'm going to talk about the Condemner. The Condemner is a shadow-touched heavy crossbow that Nope. The Condemner is a shadow-touched hand crossbow, and it is a perfect weapon for an assassin or a rogue that deals an extra d4 points of poison damage when you hit, and that's just like the normal stuff. You can also, once per rest, use it to cast Fog Cloud or Silence centered on the person that you've just attacked. Then, when you awaken it, it becomes a +2 crossbow, and when you shoot someone, not only do they take an additional d6 now instead of a d4, you can also cast Hold Person on them. And finally, if you get Condemner to its exalted state, it becomes a +3 hand crossbow, deals an extra d8 poison damage, the save DC on Hold Person goes up, and you can also use it to cast Blight on the person you've just hit, dealing an extra 8d8 points of necrotic damage, or half if they manage to make their save, but they won't because you're cool. There are 7 new feats in this book, plus 1 supernatural blessing if you are the sort of campaign that uses those things, and if you aren't, you should. They're a ton of fun to play with, and they're a way to keep rewards going even without gaining a level. But each of the 7 new feats has a ton of flavor and fun mechanics attached to it. You could be cruel, you could be a spell driver, or you could take my favorite feat, Vital Sacrifice. This feat is fantastic. I mean, I'm sure that at some point there may be some errata for it, but if you are the kind of person that plays with the rules as they're written, then you will have a lot of fun with this. What Vital Sacrifice does is it lets you take a d6 points of necrotic damage, right? But you do that to gain a blood boon. You have an hour to spend it, and you can spend your blood boon to do one of 3 different things. You can either when you make an attack roll a d6 and add that to your total. Not bad. You can, when you force someone to make a strength, dex, or con save, roll a d4 and reduce their save by the amount that you roll. Or, and this is the one that everyone's going to do, you can also spend a blood boon to deal 2d6 extra necrotic damage. Now, I mentioned the rules as written because there's no limit to the number of blood boons you can have. At least it doesn't say in the book you can only have 1. So theoretically, you can just stand around and like bloodlet yourself, deal a d6 damage to yourself for like a minute, get your cleric buddy to top you up, like an extra 20d6 points of damage, 40d6 if you crit. Combine that with something like Vampiric Touch that plays around with the necrotic damage dealt. Whew, you are in for a treat. So like if you just want to Spirit Bomb, you can. There's much less shouting while holding a ball of energy and much more shouting while slowly you bleed out. But the effect is no less explosive. Tal'Dorei Reborn is also full of a number of really cool GM tips, tools, tricks, and of course a ton of new monsters. There's a set of optional campaign rules which are basically Matt Mercer's Critical Role house rules. You may have noticed if they play the game, they don't always play by the rules in the player's handbook. Now you can see the rules that they do play by. for things like rapid quaffing, having to make checks when you are attempted to be revived or brought back from the dead. There's alternative resurrection rules that include having a harrowing return. Now, on to monsters. There are 34 new monster stat blocks in the game. You'll find horrifying snake monsters, as well as rules for something called a plains cow. One of my favorite monster stat blocks from the book is the Mage Hunter Golem. This is a special golem that's designed to mess with, screw over, and capture spellcasters. You can also find some very powerful and kind of epic foes as well. There's Jurael the Kedogeist, a 6-armed, not quite Merilith ghost spirit evil thing that looks extremely intimidating and is also very powerful at weighing in at CR 15. But of course, the one that everyone's going to be super excited about and your party is going to be trying to adopt is the Adronak. These are magical winged cats. They are constructs, feline constructs created entirely out of arcane energy. They have their own distinct personalities, some of which are tailored to their creators, but others are well, hey, we've all been around cats, so we know what that's like. But if you are a fan of Critical Role, if you always wanted to know if you could take down the heroes of Vox Machina yourself, good news, now's your chance to prove it. There are stat blocks, monster stat blocks for every member of Vox Machina in the game. So if you want to hunt them down and kill them all one by one, you can. If you want to take them on all at once, you can as well, Or I guess you could also just use them as NPCs in your campaign that you are friends with and talk to or whatever. Overall, I think the book is great. It feels like there's a lot of fun, and reading it, you really get the sense of the excitement that the people who wrote and designed this book have for D&D. It's such a small team that you really get a sense of like personality from it. You're not just getting a sense of like, this is what Exandria and a game of D&D in Exandria is like. You can tell like, oh, this is how like Matt Mercer likes to play the game, because these are mechanics that feel like they are exciting, and grow in that style. You've seen it watching Critical Role. You can find it in the book. It's a really unique look into other people's minds. And I think that it's better for that. The book really shines when it's doing the work of saying, like, this is what Exandria is. This is what Tal'Dorei is like. It feels like a book that's made by people who love and play the game for people who love and play the game. As a result, like, not everything is perfectly balanced. I think I mentioned before that some of the classes feel like a little bit older mechanics-wise from 5th edition, but everything that's used here feels like it's fun to play with. Everything feels exciting on the table. Everything feels like it's something that someone out there would find like they'd want to engage with. It's got a lot of personality and flavor, and it feels different from other D&D books. It's got its own unique identity, and if Critical Role makes more of these, I'm very excited to see what else they have in store. Hey, if you like Critical Role, you're probably hyped for the new animated series. We were too. If you want to see how, click here for our reaction to the Red Band trailer. Make sure you're not at work. I'm JR from Bowls. I'll see you later. Please, just stop. It takes us an hour to make 5 minutes, and this is why.